The brass casing hit the concrete with a metallic ping that seemed to echo longer than it should have in the desert silence. 2,000 yards away, the watermelon exploded in a pink mist against the rusted barrel that had served as a backstop. For the last 3 years, Maya Shun lowered the rifle slowly, her breath creating small clouds in the pre-dawn air of the Nevada training facility. She hadn't meant for anyone to see that shot. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The maintenance shed where she worked sat like a forgotten afterthought at the edge of Nellis Air Force Base, surrounded by chain-link fence and tumbleweeds that caught the desert wind like whispered secrets. Most personnel drove past without a second glance, focused on the gleaming fighter jets and state-of-the-art facilities that dominated the base's reputation. But Maya preferred it here, in the shadow of bureaucracy, where the only sounds were the methodical clicks of disassembly and the distant hum of aircraft, engines practicing maneuvers she'd never be cleared to fly. The shed smelled of gun oil and metal polish, familiar scents that had become as comforting as her grandmother's jasmine tea. Rows of weapons hung on pegboards with military precision, M4 carbines, sniper rifles, sidearms, and specialty equipment that arrived with instructions she wasn't supposed to read, but always did. Each piece told a story through its scratches and wear patterns, stories of missions she could only imagine from the safety of her workbench. Maya had been cleaning weapons at Nellis for 4 years, ever since her discharge from active duty. The official paperwork cited a training injury, a convenient fiction that protected everyone involved. The truth was more complicated, buried in classified files and uncomfortable conversations that ended with phrases like attitude problem and insubordination. She'd been too good at her job, too vocal about what she'd witnessed, too unwilling to stay quiet when staying quiet meant looking the other way. The rifle in her hands was a Barrett M82, a .150 caliber, designed for long-range precision that most shooters only dreamed about. It had arrived yesterday with a work order requesting a full breakdown and cleaning, along with a note that the scope needed recalibration. Standard procedure dictated she clean it, test it at the indoor range, for basic functionality and mark it ready for return. But Maya had always believed in doing things right, and right meant understanding exactly what each weapon could do, in the hands of someone who respected its capabilities. That's what had brought her out here before sunrise, to the abandoned training range that hadn't been used for live fire in over a year. The range stretched across a natural valley, with distance markers at 500-yard intervals up to the 2,000-yard line where a collection of rusted barrels and concrete blocks provided targets for the ghosts of training exercises past. The morning was perfect for shooting, no wind, crisp air, and the kind of visibility that made distant objects seem close enough to touch. Maya had set up her impromptu target at the 2,000-yard marker during her evening walk the night before. The watermelon had been past its prime anyway, destined for the compost bin behind the base commissary. She'd carried it out in her backpack, along with a small folding table that would elevate it to the approximate height of a human torso. Not that she was thinking about human targets. Maya had stopped thinking about human targets the day her discharge papers were signed. The shot itself had been almost meditative. She'd settled into the prone position with the familiarity of someone who'd spent countless hours perfecting the fundamentals: natural point of aim, breathing control, trigger discipline, follow through. The Barrett's weight distributed across the bipod and her shoulder, the scope's reticle dancing slightly with each heartbeat until that moment of perfect stillness between breaths. When time seemed to stop, she'd squeeze the trigger with the same gentle pressure she used to adjust a delicate watch mechanism, and the rifle had spoken with authority. The recoil was substantial but controlled, driving straight back through her body and into the earth beneath her. Through the scope, she'd watched the vapor trail of the bullet's passage, A brief distortion in the morning air that connected her position to the distant target in a straight line of intent and precision. The watermelon had simply ceased to exist. Maya was field stripping the Barrett when she heard the vehicles approaching. The sound was distinctive, the low rumble of military Humvees traveling at speed across rough terrain. She looked up from her work to see 3 vehicles cresting the ridge that overlooked the abandoned range, their dust clouds catching the early sunlight like signal flares announcing unwanted attention. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory guiding the disassembly process, while her mind calculated distances and escape routes. The vehicles were still a mile away, but closing fast. She had perhaps 3 minutes before they reached her position, maybe 5 if they stopped to assess the situation first. The Barrett's components spread across her cleaning mat told their own story: barrel group, bolt assembly, receiver, each piece, evidence of competence that extended far beyond her official job description. The lead vehicle's windshield caught the sun as it changed direction, heading directly for her position rather than following the access road that curved around to the range entrance. Someone had been watching. Someone had seen the shot and decided it warranted immediate investigation. Maya's fingers found the worn leather cord around her neck, where her father's dog tags hung beneath her work shirt. Staff Sergeant James Chun, Army Rangers, Khyber, Afghanistan. 2010. She'd been 17 when the casualty notification officers appeared at their front door, their dress uniforms and solemn expressions, carrying news that shattered her world into before and after. He'd been her hero, her teacher, the man who'd taken her to shooting ranges on weekend mornings and taught her that precision was a form of respect. Respect for the weapon, respect for the skill, respect for the responsibility that came with both. The vehicles were closer now, close enough that she could make out details through the heat shimmer. The lead Humvee bore the subdued markings of Special Operations Command, while the trailing vehicles showed the clean anonymity that suggested either intelligence gathering or someone important enough to rate an escort. Maya continued her methodical breakdown of the rifle, each component finding its place in the custom foam padding of her cleaning kit. Whatever came next, she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing panic or haste. She thought about her grandmother's hands, weathered and precise, teaching her to fold paper cranes during the long afternoons when grief had made speaking impossible. "Patience, little one," Grandmother Chun had whispered in Mandarin, her voice carrying the weight of her own losses. "Beautiful things require time. Important things require care." Maya had made 1,000 cranes that summer, each one a small meditation on creating something perfect from something broken. The Barrett's bolt assembly slid into its designated space with mechanical satisfaction. Maya had cleaned this same rifle model dozens of times, but each weapon had its own personality, its own quirks and preferences. This particular Barrett liked to be cleaned with methodical attention to the gas system, and its trigger group required a specific sequence of disassembly that she'd learned through patient trial and error. The weapon rewarded careful attention with flawless performance, a transaction of mutual respect that Maya understood better than most human relationships. The vehicles were entering the range proper now, kicking up dust clouds that would settle on everything for hours. Maya could see figures moving behind the windshields, multiple personnel, more than a routine investigation would warrant. Her mouth went dry as she recognized the implications. Someone important had been watching. Someone with enough authority to mobilize a rapid response based on a single rifle shot in a supposedly abandoned training area. She sealed the cleaning kit and stood, brushing dust from her fatigues and checking her appearance with the automatic precision of someone accustomed to unexpected inspections. Her reflection in the Barrett's scope showed a 28-year-old woman with her father's dark eyes and her grandmother's stubborn chin, framed by black hair pulled back in a regulation. But that hadn't been regulation for 4 years, but remained habitual. She looked competent, professional. and completely unprepared for whatever conversation was about to unfold. The lead vehicle stopped 50 yards away, its occupants taking time to assess the situation before dismounting. Maya recognized the tactical positioning, far enough to avoid immediate threat, close enough to maintain command presence, with clear fields of fire in all directions. It was textbook special operations procedure, which meant these weren't regular base security personnel responding to a noise complaint. When the doors finally opened, 3 figures emerged with the fluid coordination of a team that had worked together extensively. The lead figure was a woman in her late 30s, wearing desert camouflage with subdued colonel's eagles and the distinctive tab of Army Special Forces. She moved with the controlled economy of motion that marked professional soldiers, her eyes constantly scanning the environment while her attention remained fixed on Maya. Behind her, 2 men in similar uniforms flanked her position with automatic weapons held in casual readiness. "Specialist Chun," the colonel called across the distance, her voice carrying easily in the desert air. "Or do you prefer former Specialist Chun these days?" Maya felt her stomach clench at the use of her name and former rank. This wasn't a random encounter or a routine security check. Someone had done their homework, accessed her personnel files, and decided that her presence at this range warranted personal attention from field-grade officers. She straightened to attention automatically, muscle memory overriding 4 years of civilian life. "Ma'am," Maya replied, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "I was just performing routine maintenance on equipment from my work order." The colonel approached with measured steps, her companions maintaining their flanking positions, but relaxing slightly as the situation developed. Maya noticed details that spoke to extensive combat experience, the way the colonel's eyes never stopped moving, the unconscious positioning that kept her body angled to present a smaller target profile, the calloused hands that suggested thousands of hours with weapons and equipment. "Colonel Sarah Martinez, Special Operations Command," the woman introduced herself, stopping 10 feet away. "That was quite a shot, Specialist. 2,000 yards, single round, stationary target, imperfect. Conditions, textbook long-range precision." Maya said nothing, recognizing the statement as an invitation to explain herself that could easily become a trap depending on her response. She'd learned during her discharge proceedings that military conversations with superior officers were minefields where the wrong word could detonate consequences that lasted for years. "The work order requested calibration verification," Maya finally said, choosing her words carefully. "I was conducting function testing to ensure the optic was properly zeroed." Colonel Martinez smiled, expression that didn't quite reach her. "Eyes, function testing. At 2,000 yards. On a watermelon." She gestured toward the distant target area where pink fragments still marked the location of Maya's shot. "Most armorers conduct function testing at 25 yards using paper targets. But then again, most armorers didn't score expert marksman ratings in 3 different weapon systems during their active duty service." The reference to her military records confirmed Maya's growing suspicion that this encounter had been planned rather than spontaneous. Someone had been monitoring her activities, accessing her personnel files, and waiting for an opportunity to make contact. The question was why, and what they wanted from a discharged specialist who cleaned weapons for a living. "The range was available," Maya said. "I wanted to ensure complete accuracy before returning the weapon to service." "The range has been closed for live fire exercises for 14 months, Colonel Martinez replied. "Which means you came out here knowing you'd be alone, knowing you wouldn't be observed, knowing you could test your skills without drawing attention." She paused, studying Maya's face for reaction. "Except someone was observing." "Someone is always observing, Specialist Chun. The question is whether that observation represents opportunity or threat." The morning sun had climbed higher, creating sharp shadows that broke the landscape into geometric patterns of light and darkness. Maya could hear the distant sound of fighter jets conducting training exercises, their engines a constant reminder of the military world that continued its operations beyond the boundaries of her civilian existence. She thought about her apartment off base, with its neat arrangement of furniture and the shooting trophy she'd never displayed, hidden in a closet box labeled Army Stuff that she hadn't opened in 2 years. Maya's alarm clock buzzed at 0430. Every morning, a habit that had nothing to do with her civilian job requirements and everything to do with the stubborn patterns carved into her psyche by 8 years of military discipline. She would lie in the darkness of her studio apartment for exactly 30 seconds, listening to the sound of her own breathing and the distant hum of highway traffic, before rolling out of bed with the mechanical precision of someone who had never learned to sleep in. The apartment was spartanly furnished, decorated with the careful neutrality of someone who'd learned not to get too attached to places or things. A single bed with military corners, a small table that served for both meals and paperwork, a television she rarely watched, and a bookshelf filled with technical manuals and worn paperbacks that she read during the long Nevada evenings when sleep refused to come. The only personal touches were a framed photograph of her father in his army dress uniform and a small jade plant that had somehow survived 4 years of her sporadic attention. Her morning routine was invariable: 20 minutes of physical training. In the apartment's small living space, 15 minutes for shower and grooming, 10 minutes to prepare and consume breakfast that consisted of black coffee and whatever protein bar she'd grabbed from the commissary during her previous visit. By 0530, she was dressed in civilian work clothes that still bore the creases and attention to detail of military precision, walking the 8 blocks to Nellis Air Force Base through desert air that carried the scent of sage and jet fuel. Walk gave her time to think, to prepare for another day of handling weapons she would never again carry in combat, cleaning instruments of precision that would serve purposes she would never again be cleared to understand. Each morning, she passed the same landmarks: the coffee shop where off-duty airmen gathered before shift changes, the small park where families brought children to watch the fighter jets practice overhead, the bus stop where contractors waited for transportation to the classified areas of the base where her security clearance no longer granted access. Maya's work began before the base fully awakened, in the quiet hours when the maintenance shed belonged entirely to her, and the methodical tasks that filled her days. She would unlock the steel door with keys that represented trust earned through 4 years of reliable service, flip on fluorescent lights that revealed orderly rows of weapons awaiting attention, and begin the careful process of inventory that ensured accountability for every piece of equipment under her responsibility. The weapons arrived daily with work orders that told partial stories: routine maintenance, desert training exercise, scope replacement, user-reported zero drift, complete overhaul, equipment returned from overseas deployment. Maya had learned to read between the lines to understand the operational tempo reflected in wear patterns and the types of repairs requested. Increased activity in certain weapon systems suggested deployments or training exercises. Unusual modifications hinted at specialized missions. Battle damage told stories that classified reports would never record in detail. She worked alone by choice and by design. Her supervisor, Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, had learned that Maya's productivity doubled when she wasn't required to make small talk or coordinate with other technicians. He would stop by twice daily to check her progress and sign off on completed work orders, but otherwise left her to the solitary rhythm that had become her preferred method of engaging with the world. Maya's hands moved with practiced confidence. As she disassembled each weapon, her mind cataloging every component and assessing its condition with the thoroughness that had made her invaluable during her active duty service. She understood these machines in ways that went beyond technical knowledge, recognizing the subtle relationships between moving parts and the precise tolerances that separated reliable function from catastrophic failure. Each weapon was a puzzle, that required respect, attention, and the kind of patient care that most people reserve for living things. During her lunch break, Maya would walk to the abandoned section of the base where old aircraft sat in various stages of decommissioning. She would eat her sandwich in the shade of a decommissioned F-16, looking out across the desert toward the mountains that marked the boundary between the teal, controlled environment of the base and the vast uncertainty of the civilian world beyond. These moments of solitude were precious, free from the constant awareness of being observed and evaluated that colored her interactions with anyone wearing a uniform. The F-16 had become her unofficial confidant, a silent listener for the thoughts she couldn't share with living people. She would tell it about the weapons she'd worked on, the stories she imagined behind their service records, the dreams that visited her during the few hours she managed to sleep. Sometimes she would rest her hand against its aluminum skin and feel the residual warmth that the desert sun had left there, imagining the missions it had flown and the pilots who had trusted their lives to its mechanical reliability. Maya's afternoons were spent in the more complex work that required her specialized knowledge. Sniper rifles arriving from field exercises needed precision attention to their optics and barrel harmonics. Machine guns required understanding of timing and headspace that could mean the difference between accurate suppressing fire and catastrophic malfunction. Specialty weapons arrived with cryptic work orders that suggested capabilities she wasn't cleared to know about, but could infer from their construction and wear patterns. She had developed relationships with these machines that superseded her. Relationships with most people. She knew which rifles preferred specific cleaning solvents and which required particular attention to their gas systems. She understood the personalities of different weapon platforms, their strengths and quirks, and the small adjustments that optimized their performance. This knowledge had made her reputation during active duty, when her section's weapons consistently outperformed others in accuracy and reliability metrics. After work, Maya would stop at the base library, a quiet building that most personnel ignored, in favor of digital resources and entertainment options. She would research technical specifications, study ballistics data, and read military history that helped her understand the evolution of the weapons that filled her days. The librarian, an elderly civilian contractor named Mrs. Patterson, had become accustomed to Maya's presence and would save interesting books that arrived in new shipments. "You're educating yourself out of your current position," Mrs. Patterson had observed one evening as Maya checked out a text on advanced metallurgy. "Knowledge like that is wasted on routine maintenance." Maya had smiled politely but offered no response. Mrs. Patterson didn't understand that the knowledge wasn't wasted, it was insurance. Insurance against the day when routine maintenance might not be enough, when her skills might be needed for purposes that hadn't yet revealed themselves. She'd learned during her discharge that the military discarded people as readily as it discarded obsolete equipment, and she was determined never again to be caught without options. Her evenings followed patterns as rigid as her mornings. Physical training in her apartment, using body weight exercises and stretching routines that maintained the conditioning she'd built during active duty. Dinner prepared from ingredients that required minimal storage and cleanup. Reading that alternated between technical subjects and the escapist fiction that helped her sleep. By 2100, she was in bed, setting her alarm for another 0430 awakening and another day of solitary precision work. The weekends disrupted this rhythm, leaving Maya adrift in unstructured time that she struggled to fill meaningfully. She would drive to Las Vegas occasionally, walking through casinos filled with people celebrating or drowning various forms of luck, feeling like an observer of human experiences that seemed to belong to a different species. The noise and chaos of civilian entertainment felt alien after years of military order, leaving her more isolated than before. Sometimes she would drive in the opposite direction, into the desert where shooting enthusiasts gathered at informal ranges to practice with personal weapons. She would watch from a distance, recognizing techniques and equipment that spoke to different levels of training and commitment. Occasionally, someone would invite her to join a shooting group, but she always declined. Her skills would draw attention, and questions that she couldn't answer without revealing more about her background than felt safe. Maya's most treasured possessions were her father's personal effects, returned to her family after his death in Afghanistan. His dog tags, worn smooth by years of wear, hung around her neck like a talisman connecting her to purpose that felt increasingly distant. His shooting diary, filled with handwritten notes about load development and ballistics calculations, sat in her bedside table where she could read his observations during sleepless nights. His medals remained in their presentation case, honors that represented sacrifices she was still trying to understand. She would sometimes take out his Purple Heart and hold it to the light, studying the profile of George Washington and wondering what her father had been thinking during his final moments. The official report mentioned an improvised explosive device and immediate casualties, clinical language that sanitized the reality of violence and loss. But Maya knew that her father's final thoughts would have been tactical, assessing threats, calculating responses, trying to protect the soldiers under his command even as his own life drained away. These memories accompanied her to work each morning, invisible companions that influenced every decision and every careful manipulation of the weapons that crossed her workbench. She cleaned each rifle as if her father might be the one to carry it into combat. She calibrated each scope as if his life might depend on its accuracy. She tested each mechanism as if the fate of his entire unit rested on its reliable function. Contradiction between her current civilian status and her persistent military mindset created a constant tension that colored every aspect of her daily existence. She was a soldier without a war, a specialist without a mission, a marksman without targets that mattered. The skills that had once defined her purpose now served only to maintain equipment for others to use, a vicarious participation in the profession of arms that left her feeling like a spectator in her own life. Maya's sleep was frequently interrupted by dreams that blended memory with imagination. She would find herself back in training scenarios, executing complex shooting problems under the watchful eyes of instructors who pushed her toward levels of performance that exceeded standard expectations. She would wake with her heart racing and her hands already positioning themselves as if gripping a rifle, muscle memory overriding conscious thought, in ways that reminded her how deeply her military training had penetrated her nervous system. During these nocturnal intervals, when sleep retreated and dawn remained hours away, Maya would stand at her apartment window and look toward the base where security lights created geometric patterns against the desert darkness. She would wonder about the missions being planned in classified briefing rooms, the operators preparing for deployments to places that wouldn't appear in official statements, the weapons being prepared for purposes that would never be publicly acknowledged. She understood that her discharge had been necessary to protect institutional interests that superseded individual careers. She had seen things that complicated official narratives, witnessed decisions that reflected political rather than tactical considerations, reported problems that created inconvenient documentation for superior officers. Her competence had made her dangerous in an environment where competence was valued only when it didn't challenge established procedures. But understanding the reasons for her discharge didn't eliminate the sense of incompleteness that pervaded her civilian existence. She was a precision instrument that had been taken out of service, while still capable of performance that exceeded specifications. She was a resource that remained unused while missions continued to require exactly the skills she had spent years perfecting. The morning after Colonel Martinez's unexpected visit, Maya arrived at the maintenance shed to find her workbench had been searched. Nothing was missing, but the subtle disorganization spoke to hands that understood military equipment, but hadn't learned her personal system for organizing tools and components. The cleaning kit she'd used for the Barrett sat exactly where she'd left it, but the foam padding inside had been shifted slightly, creating small gaps that revealed the careful attention someone had paid to cataloging her equipment. Maya completed her morning inventory with heightened awareness, noting details that would have escaped her attention during routine operations. Someone had accessed her computer terminal. The keyboard position was wrong by perhaps an inch, and the monitor had been adjusted to a height that accommodated someone taller than her 5'6" frame. Her logbook showed no unauthorized entries, but the binding creases suggested pages had been photographed rather than copied. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez arrived 30 minutes later than usual, his normally relaxed demeanor replaced by the careful neutrality that Maya recognized as administrative discomfort. He'd been her supervisor for 3 years, a career NCO who valued competence over politics and had consistently rated her performance as exceptional. But this morning, his greeting carried undertones that suggested their professional relationship was about to become complicated. "Shun, we need to discuss your work schedule," Rodriguez began, settling into the metal chair beside her workbench with the heaviness of someone delivering unwelcome news. "There's been some concern about your access to the training ranges during off-duty hours." Maya continued her disassembly of an M4 carbine, her hands maintaining their methodical rhythm while her mind processed the implications of Rodriguez's statement. The concern hadn't originated with him. His body language and reluctant tone indicated he was delivering someone else's decision rather than expressing his own opinion. "I wasn't aware that range access was restricted for maintenance personnel," Maya replied, keeping her voice professionally neutral. "The work order specified function testing for the Barrett system." Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably, his eyes avoiding direct contact with hers. "The issue isn't the testing itself, it's the method and location you chose. 2,000 yards is beyond standard parameters for routine calibration. The rifle is designed for long-range precision. Testing it at 25 yards would be like evaluating a Ferrari by driving it around a parking lot." Maya set down her cleaning rod and turned to face Rodriguez directly. "I was ensuring that taxpayer equipment met its design specifications before returning it to service." "I understand your reasoning, Chun, I really do. But there are protocols for extended range testing, authorization requirements, supervision mandates." Rodriguez pulled out a manila folder that contained documents Maya recognized as modification to her work authorization. "Effective immediately. All function testing will be conducted at the designated indoor range using standard procedures and oversight." Maya accepted the documents and scanned their contents, recognizing the bureaucratic language that transformed professional competence into administrative liability. Someone had decided that her skills represented a risk that required management through restriction rather than utilization. The papers essentially demoted her from trusted specialist to supervised technician, requiring approval for any work that exceeded basic cleaning and minor adjustments. "This is about more than range access," Maya observed, setting the papers aside. "Someone is concerned about my capabilities, not my procedures." Rodriguez nodded reluctantly. "There was an inquiry about your background, your military service record, your reason for discharge. Questions that came from levels well above my pay grade." He leaned forward, lowering his voice to conversational tones that suggested personal concern rather than official communication. "Shun, what happened during your active duty that makes colonels nervous about you cleaning rifles?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications that Maya couldn't address without revealing classified information that would complicate Rodriguez's position as much as her own. Her discharge had been negotiated to protect operational security and institutional credibility, sealed with non-disclosure agreements that traded her silence for a clean service record and civilian employment eligibility. "I was very good at my job," Maya said finally. "Sometimes being very good at your job in the military creates more problems than it solves." Rodriguez accepted her non-answer with the resignation of someone who'd spent enough time in uniform to recognize the boundaries between information he needed to know and information he was better off not knowing. He stood and moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "Chun, you've been an exemplary employee. Your work is meticulous, your reliability is absolute, and your technical knowledge exceeds anyone else in this facility." He turned back to face her. But exemplary employees don't usually draw attention from Special Operations Command. Whatever your story is, it's catching up with you. You might want to consider whether it's time to get ahead of it. After Rodriguez left, Maya found herself unable to concentrate on the routine tasks that normally provided refuge from unwanted attention. Each weapon that crossed her bench seemed to carry questions about her qualifications to handle it, her authorization to understand its capabilities, her trustworthiness to maintain operational security regarding its applications. The mechanical precision that had always calmed her mind felt hollow, like going through motions that had lost their connection to meaningful purpose. The first interruption came during her lunch break. Maya was eating her sandwich beneath the decommissioned F-16 when a civilian contractor approached with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to asking questions and expecting answers. He was middle-aged, dressed in khaki pants and a polo shirt that suggested government employment without requiring uniform specifications. "Ms. Chun, I'm David Harrison from the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your current duties and qualifications." Maya recognized the approach as administrative interrogation disguised as routine inquiry. Harrison's credentials identified him as a GS-13, investigator with authority to examine personnel matters that affected operational security. His presence confirmed that her morning encounter with Colonel Martinez had initiated formal review processes that would examine every aspect of her civilian employment. "I'm authorized to discuss my current maintenance responsibilities," Maya replied, establishing boundaries before the conversation could develop in unwelcome directions. "My previous military service is subject to non-disclosure agreements that limit what information I can provide." Harrison smiled with the practiced reassurance of someone who'd conducted hundreds of similar interviews. "I'm not interested in classified operational details. Ms. Chun, I'm trying to understand how someone with your specialized background ended up in a routine maintenance position, and whether that arrangement serves everyone's best interests." The questions that followed were carefully constructed to elicit information without directly requesting classified details. Harrison wanted to understand her shooting skills, her technical knowledge, her familiarity with advanced weapon systems, and her current level of security clearance. Each answer Maya provided seemed to generate 2 additional questions, creating a widening circle of inquiry that suggested the investigation had broader scope than routine personnel review. "Your performance evaluations consistently rate you as exceptional," Harrison observed, consulting documents that Maya recognized as her civilian employment records. "Your supervisor notes technical capabilities that exceed position requirements. Your work completion rate is 30% higher than average for similar positions." He looked up from his notes. "These metrics suggest someone who's significantly underutilized in their current role." "I take pride in thorough work," Maya replied. "Quality maintenance ensures reliable equipment performance. Quality maintenance doesn't typically require the kind of ballistics knowledge that would enable 2,000-yard precision shooting." Harrison's tone remained conversational, but his eyes had sharpened with investigative focus. That level of expertise suggests training and experience that goes well beyond standard military small arms instruction. Maya felt the conversation approaching territory that her non-disclosure agreements prohibited her from entering. "My military training prepared me for various contingencies. I've maintained those skills through personal interest and practice." "Personal interest." Harrison repeated the phrase as if testing its plausibility. "Miss Chun, The shot you made yesterday morning would qualify as expert-level performance by special operations standards. Personal interest doesn't typically produce capabilities that exceed professional requirements for elite military units. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, with Harrison probing the boundaries of Maya's willingness to discuss her background without crossing the legal lines that protected classified information. When he finally concluded the session, Maya understood that her situation had escalated beyond administrative curiosity to formal investigation by agencies with broader authority than base security personnel. The afternoon brought additional complications, in the form of unusual work orders that seemed designed to test her reactions rather than accomplish necessary maintenance. 3 sniper rifles arrived simultaneously, all requiring urgent attention for undefined operational requirements. The weapons were configured for different mission profiles: urban precision, desert long range, and maritime operations, suggesting they were being prepared for diverse deployment scenarios. Maya began her work on the urban precision rifle, a customized system built around a Remington 700 action with specialized optics and suppressor mounting points. As she disassembled the weapon, she noticed modifications that indicated recent field use under demanding conditions. The barrel showed signs of rapid heating and cooling cycles. The bolt face carried residue patterns consistent with high-volume shooting, and the scope mount had been adjusted repeatedly by someone with expert knowledge of ballistics principles. Weapon told a story of precision shooting under pressure, of rapid target engagement in environments where accuracy was measured in inches rather than feet. Maya found herself reconstructing the tactical scenarios that would require such equipment, imagining the operators who depended on its reliable performance in situations where mechanical failure meant mission compromise or personnel casualties. Similar stories emerged from the other rifles as Maya progressed through her work. The desert long-range system showed evidence of extreme environmental exposure, with sand intrusion patterns that suggested operations in Middle Eastern theaters. The maritime rifle carried corrosion indicators consistent with saltwater exposure, and the specialized coatings that protected precision equipment during amphibious operations. Each weapon represented operational capabilities that Maya understood intellectually but would never again participate in directly. They were tools of a profession she'd been removed from, instruments of precision that would serve purposes she could only imagine from the sidelines of her civilian existence. As Maya worked, she became aware of increased activity in the areas surrounding her maintenance shed. Vehicles passed more frequently than usual, their occupants paying attention to her facility in ways that suggested coordinated observation. Personnel she didn't recognize appeared at vantage points that provided clear sightlines to her workspace, maintaining positions long enough to be noticed but not long enough to constitute obvious surveillance. The pattern was familiar from her military experience, a combination of overt and covert observation designed to assess someone's reactions to pressure while gathering intelligence about their capabilities and intentions. Maya recognized the technique because she'd been trained to use it herself during the advanced courses that had qualified her for assignments requiring more than standard military competence. By late afternoon, the psychological pressure of constant observation had begun to affect her concentration. Maya found herself checking sightlines to windows, noting escape routes from her workspace, and maintaining heightened awareness of approaching personnel. The hypervigilance that had kept her alive during military deployments was reasserting itself in response to perceived threats that she couldn't directly identify or confront. The final provocation came during the last hour of her shift, when a work order arrived for immediate processing of a weapon system that Maya recognized as beyond her current authorization level. The Barrett M107A1 was a .50 caliber precision rifle configured for extreme long-range operations, equipped with advanced optics and ballistic computers that required specialized knowledge to calibrate properly. The work order was signed by Colonel Martinez and marked Priority Urgent, with instructions for complete systems check and immediate return to service. Maya understood that this was a test, an assessment of whether she would acknowledge limitations imposed by her restricted authorization or demonstrate capabilities that exceeded her current clearance level. She stood at her workbench for several minutes, studying the weapon and weighing her options. Following her restricted authorization would mean returning the rifle uncompleted, potentially compromising operational readiness for personnel who might depend on its reliable performance. Completing the work would demonstrate skills that contradicted her official position, but might save lives in ways she would never know about. Maya thought about her father's final mission, about the soldiers who had depended on weapons maintained by people they would never meet, about the chain of responsibility that connected her solitary work to operational success or failure, in places that didn't appear on unclassified maps. She thought about the warriors who would carry this rifle into situations where precision might be the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. She began the disassembly process with methodical care, her hands moving through procedures that her current authorization didn't technically permit her to perform. Each component received the attention that her father would have given to equipment that might save American lives, regardless of bureaucratic restrictions that prioritized administrative compliance over operational effectiveness. As Maya worked, she was aware that her actions were being observed and recorded, that her decision to exceed her official limitations was providing evidence for whatever administrative processes had been initiated by her morning encounter with Colonel Martinez. But the weapon in her hands represented trust that transcended paperwork, trust from operators who would bet their lives on its reliable performance, trust from families who would never know the names of the technicians who prepared their loved ones' equipment. By closing time, Maya had completed the Barrett's overhaul with precision that would have impressed her most demanding military instructors. Every component had been cleaned, inspected, and reassembled to specifications that exceeded manufacturer standards. The ballistic computer had been calibrated using data that she technically wasn't authorized to access, and the optics had been zeroed with mathematical precision that accounted for atmospheric conditions, ammunition characteristics, and the subtle mechanical variations that affected long-range accuracy. As she secured the completed weapon in its transport case, Maya noticed that the observation posts around her facility had been abandoned. The vehicles that had circulated throughout the day were gone, and the heightened activity that had characterized the afternoon had returned to normal base operations. The sudden absence of attention was more unsettling than the surveillance had been, suggesting that whatever assessment had been conducted was now complete. Maya locked her workspace and began her evening walk home, acutely aware that her actions throughout the day had been cataloged and analyzed by people whose intentions remained unclear. She demonstrated capabilities that exceeded her official position, violated restrictions that had been imposed for administrative reasons, and provided evidence of technical knowledge that contradicted her civilian employment classification. Walk took her past the coffee shop where off-duty personnel gathered to decompress from their shifts, their conversations mixing operational concerns with personal problems in the casual way that military people had of compartmentalizing their professional responsibilities. Maya envied their ability to find community in shared service, their confidence that their contributions were valued and understood by the institution that employed them. She paused at the small park where families brought children to watch the fighter jets practice overhead maneuvers. A young girl was pointing excitedly at an F-22 Raptor executing precision turns that demonstrated capabilities worth hundreds of millions of dollars in development costs. The child's wonder at the aircraft's performance reminded Maya of her own childhood fascination with military technology. Before she'd understood the human costs that accompanied such sophisticated machines, Maya's apartment felt smaller than usual that evening, its sparse furnishings and careful organization a reflection of someone who'd learned not to accumulate possessions that couldn't be quickly packed or easily abandoned. She prepared dinner with mechanical efficiency, her mind replaying the day's events and analyzing the motivations that might have driven such coordinated attention to her activities. The phone call came at 1900 hours, precisely when someone familiar with military scheduling would expect to find her available for conversation. The caller ID showed only numbers, but the voice that greeted her was Colonel Martinez, speaking with the authoritative tone that suggested official business rather than casual inquiry. "Specialist Chun, I hope you had a productive day at work. I understand you encountered some interesting equipment that required your specialized attention." Maya recognized the statement as confirmation that her activities had been monitored in detail, that her decision to exceed her authorization limits had been observed and recorded, that the test she'd suspected was indeed being conducted for purposes she couldn't yet understand. "Ma'am, I completed the work orders assigned to me according to the technical specifications required for safe and reliable operation." Technical specifications. Colonel Martinez's voice carried amusement. That suggested Maya's careful phrasing wasn't fooling anyone. "Specialist, the ballistic computer calibration you performed this afternoon required access to classified trajectory data that your current clearance doesn't authorize. The optical zeroing you accomplished used mathematical models that are taught only in advanced Zyper schools. The precision measurements you took exceeded manufacturer tolerances by factors that would impress professional gunsmiths." Maya remained silent, understanding that anything she said would either confirm capabilities she wasn't supposed to possess or involve admissions that could complicate her situation further. Colonel Martinez seemed content to let the silence stretch, an interrogation technique that relied on the subject's discomfort to generate voluntary disclosure. "Specialist Chun, your country invested considerable resources in your training and development. Your discharge represented a significant loss of operational capability that continues to affect mission readiness in various theaters of operation." The colonel's tone shifted to something more personal, less formally military. "We're facing challenges that require exactly the skills you've spent years perfecting. Perhaps it's time to discuss whether your talents might be better utilized in service of national security interests." The suggestion hung in the air between them, weighted with implications that Maya couldn't fully evaluate without understanding the context that Colonel Martinez wasn't providing. The military had discarded her when her competence became inconvenient for institutional politics, and now that same competence was apparently needed for purposes that remained classified. "Ma'am, my discharge was characterized as honorable with full benefits. My civilian employment allows me to contribute to national defense in ways that don't require security clearances or operational deployment. Your civilian employment wastes capabilities that took years and millions of dollars to develop." Colonel Martinez replied with the bluntness that Maya remembered from her active duty experience. "You're cleaning rifles that other people will use for missions you could execute better than anyone currently on our roster. It's like using a surgeon to change bandages." Maya thought about the weapons she'd worked on that day, about the operators who would depend on their reliable performance in situations she could only imagine from the safety of her maintenance shed. She thought about her father's sacrifice in Afghanistan, about the meaning he'd found in service that transcended personal comfort or professional advancement. "What are you asking me to do, ma'am?" "I'm asking you to consider whether your current situation serves your own interests or the interests of people who need your skills more than you need your anonymity." Colonel Martinez paused, and Maya could hear papers shuffling in the background. "There's a training exercise scheduled for next week. Advanced marksmanship assessment for personnel being considered for specialized assignments. Your participation would help us evaluate whether our current selection standards are adequate for emerging operational requirements." The invitation was carefully worded to sound like routine training support rather than formal recruitment, but Maya recognized the implications. Someone wanted to assess her current capabilities under controlled conditions, to determine whether her skills had deteriorated during 4 years of civilian employment or remained at levels that justified renewed military interest. "Ma'am, I'm not sure my current clearance status would permit participation in specialized training exercises. Your clearance status can be adjusted based on operational necessity," Colonel Martinez replied. "The question is whether you're willing to demonstrate that such adjustment would serve national security interests." Maya stood at her apartment window, looking toward the base where security lights illuminated facilities that housed capabilities she would never again be cleared to understand fully. She thought about the precision instruments she maintained for others to use, about the operators who carried her work into situations where excellence was measured in lives saved rather than performance evaluations. When would this training exercise take place? Monday morning, 0600, at the long-range training facility in the restricted area of the base. Wear appropriate outdoor clothing and bring identification. Transportation and equipment will be provided. Colonel Martinez's tone had shifted back to official business, suggesting that Maya's question had been interpreted as acceptance rather than mere inquiry. "Ma'am, I haven't agreed to participate. I'm asking for information that would help me make an informed decision." "Specialist Chun, the decision was made the moment you took that 2,000-yard shot yesterday morning. Everything since then has been assessment and preparation." The colonel's voice carried finality that brooked no argument. "Monday morning, 0600, don't disappoint the people who still believe in your potential." The line went dead, leaving Maya alone with a decision that felt less like choice than inevitable consequence. She'd been identified, evaluated, and recruited through a process that had begun the moment someone observed her demonstration of skills that exceeded her civilian position. The military machine that had discarded her was now reclaiming her for purposes that remained classified, but apparently critical enough to overcome previous institutional concerns about her suitability for continued service. Maya spent the weekend in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of her normal routine while her mind processed the implications of Monday morning's appointment. She cleaned her apartment with unusual thoroughness, organized her possessions with the systematic care of someone preparing for extended absence, and wrote letters to her grandmother that she didn't send. Sunday evening, she retrieved her father's medals from their presentation case and held each one to the light, studying the craftsmanship that transformed base medals into symbols of service and sacrifice. The Purple Heart caught the lamplight and threw colored reflections across her apartment walls, reminders of the costs that accompanied military service at levels that exceeded routine. Administrative support. She thought about the path that had led her from promising young soldier to discharged specialist to civilian technician to whatever she was about to become. Each transition had been driven by forces beyond her control, institutional decisions that prioritized organizational needs over individual preferences. But somewhere in that progression, she'd lost the sense of purpose that had motivated her original enlistment, the conviction that her skills served meanings larger than her personal circumstances. Maya set her alarm for 0500 Monday morning and tried to sleep, knowing that whatever happened at the long-range training facility would determine the next phase of her relationship with the military institution that had shaped her adult life. She was a precision instrument that had been taken out of service and now was being recalled for duties that would test whether her capabilities had survived 4 years of administrative exile. Maya arrived at the long-range training facility as dawn painted the desert mountains in shades of amber and rose gold that reminded her why she'd chosen to remain in Nevada after her discharge. The facility sat in a natural valley that had been modified with berms and target systems, extending to ranges that disappeared beyond the horizon. A purpose-built environment for testing human precision at distances that challenged both equipment and operator capabilities. Colonel Martinez waited beside a collection of vehicles that included specialized range support equipment and what Maya recognized as mobile command and control systems. The presence of such sophisticated assets suggested that this training exercise carried significance that extended far beyond routine marksmanship assessment. Other personnel moved through pre-exercise preparations with the coordinated efficiency that marked advanced military operations. Specialist Chun, thank you for joining us this morning. Colonel Martinez greeted her with professional courtesy that couldn't entirely mask the satisfaction in her voice. Today's exercise will evaluate your current capabilities while providing assessment data for personnel selection decisions that affect multiple operational commands. Maya scanned the assembled group and recognized faces that belonged to different military specialties. Special operations personnel whose unit patches indicated recent deployment experience, technical specialists whose equipment suggested intelligence gathering responsibilities, and senior officers whose presence indicated that this exercise had attracted attention at levels well above routine training oversight. Ma'am, this appears to be more complex than the marksmanship assessment you described during our phone conversation. Complexity is relative, Specialist. Your task is straightforward. Demonstrate your shooting capabilities under various conditions. While we gather data about performance parameters that interest our operational planners. Colonel Martinez gestured toward a table where weapons and equipment had been arranged with care that suggested each piece had been selected for specific assessment purposes. The weapons display included systems that Maya recognized as representing different mission profiles and operational environments. A bolt-action precision rifle configured for extreme long-range operations, a semi-automatic system designed for rapid engagement of multiple targets, and a suppressed platform optimized for operations requiring acoustic signature management. Each weapon had been equipped with advanced optics and configured with ammunition selected for specific ballistic characteristics. Major Sarah Williams, a Special Forces officer whose presence Maya hadn't noticed during her initial scan, approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command responsibilities in demanding environments. Her uniform carried decorations that indicated extensive combat experience, and her demeanor suggested someone who'd earned respect through demonstrated competence rather than administrative advancement. Specialist Chun, I've reviewed your military service record and your recent performance as a civilian contractor. Your technical knowledge and practical shooting skills represent capabilities that we need for current operational requirements. Major Williams paused beside the weapons display, her hand resting on the suppressed precision rifle. Today's assessment will help us determine whether those capabilities can be integrated into ongoing mission planning. Maya understood that she was being evaluated for purposes that remained classified, that her performance today would influence decisions about her future that had already been made by people whose authority superseded her personal preferences. The careful organization of personnel and equipment suggested that significant resources had been allocated to this assessment, that her shooting demonstration carried implications for operational planning that extended beyond individual capability evaluation. The first shooting position was located at the 800-yard line, a distance that represented standard long-range precision requirements for most military applications. Maya settled into the prone position behind the bolt-action rifle, her body automatically adjusting to the familiar geometry of precision shooting. The target was a standard military silhouette that would require accuracy measured in inches rather than feet. As Maya prepared for her first shot, she became aware of the sophisticated observation and measurement systems that had been deployed to record her performance. High-speed cameras captured her shooting technique from multiple angles. Ballistic measurement equipment tracked projectile performance, and digital systems recorded timing and accuracy data with precision that exceeded competition shooting standards. Rifle spoke with authority, its recoil driving straight back through Maya's body into the earth beneath her. Through the scope, she watched the target marker confirm a center mass hit that would have been immediately fatal in combat conditions. The mechanical precision felt natural, like returning to a skill that had never really been lost, despite 4 years of disuse. Excellent shot placement and technique, Major Williams observed, consulting a tablet that displayed real-time performance data. Your natural point of aim was perfect. Your trigger control showed no indication of flinch or jerk, and your follow-through maintained scope picture for complete shot evaluation. Maya transitioned to the semi-automatic system, a platform designed for engaging multiple targets in rapid succession, while maintaining accuracy standards that exceeded standard military requirements. The targets were arranged at varying distances from 300 to 600 yards, requiring her to make rapid calculations for range and wind conditions while maintaining the shooting rhythm necessary for effective multiple target engagement. The engagement sequence unfolded with mechanical precision, Maya's body moving through the shooting positions while her mind processed ballistic calculations that had become automatic through years of practice and refinement. Each shot placement was recorded by the observation systems, creating a digital record of capabilities that someone apparently needed to document with scientific thoroughness. Time, 47 seconds. Accuracy, 10 shots, 10 hits, all within the scoring ring that represents immediate incapacitation, Major Williams announced, her voice carrying professional admiration for performance that clearly exceeded her expectations. Your target transition speed and accuracy retention demonstrate training levels that we typically see only in personnel with recent combat deployment experience. The final shooting position was located at 1,500 yards, a distance that challenged both equipment capabilities and human skill in ways that separated expert marksmen from exceptional ones. The target was smaller than those used for closer range exercises, requiring precision that demanded perfect execution of every element in the shooting process. Maya studied the environmental conditions through the rifle's scope, noting wind indicators and atmospheric factors that would affect projectile performance over the extended flight time required for 1,500-yard shots. The calculations involved were complex enough to challenge shooters with extensive training, requiring integration of mathematical knowledge with practical experience that took years to develop. She settled into the shooting position with the deliberate care that extreme long-range shooting demanded, her body and mind achieving the state of focused calm that her father had taught her to recognize as the prerequisite for exceptional performance. The rifle became an extension of her will, its mechanical precision amplifying human capabilities in ways that transformed intent into reality across distances that challenged comprehension. The shot broke cleanly, the bullet beginning its ballistic arc toward a target that was barely visible even through high magnification optics. Maya maintained her position behind the rifle, watching through the scope as the projectile completed its trajectory and impacted the target, with accuracy that drew immediate response from the observation personnel. Direct center hit at 1,500 yards, first shot, no sighters or range confirmation, Major Williams announced with undisguised amazement. The ballistic calculation required for that shot accuracy demonstrates medical understanding that we teach only in advanced sniper schools, and the execution shows muscle memory that doesn't deteriorate with disuse. Colonel Martinez approached Maya's shooting position with an expression that mixed professional satisfaction with something that looked like vindication. Specialist Chun, your performance this morning confirms assessment data that suggested your capabilities remained at exceptional levels despite extended separation from operational duty. The question now is whether you're prepared to discuss how those capabilities might be employed in service of current national security requirements. Maya remained in the prone position, the rifle still mounted to her shoulder, while she processed the implications of what had just occurred. She'd been tested and evaluated, her skills cataloged and documented, her potential assessed by people who apparently had specific applications in mind for her demonstrated capabilities. The military institution that had discharged her was now documenting reasons to recall her for purposes that remained classified, but obviously significant. "Ma'am, I need to understand what you're asking me to commit to before I can provide any response to recruitment offers." Colonel Martinez nodded, apparently having expected this request for clarification. "Specialist Chen, there are operational requirements developing that need personnel with very specific skill sets. Long-range precision capabilities, technical expertise with advanced weapon systems, and the ability to operate independently in environments where standard support structures may not be available." Maya understood that she was being recruited for assignments that would place her in situations where her skills would be tested under conditions that exceeded the controlled environment of training exercises. The careful wording suggested missions that carried significant risk, that required capabilities possessed by very few personnel, that served national security interests in ways that wouldn't be publicly acknowledged. "Ma'am, my previous discharge was related to disagreements about operational procedures and reporting requirements. What assurance do I have that similar conflicts won't arise if I return to active duty? Your previous discharge was an administrative necessity that protected both your interests and institutional requirements." Colonel Martinez replied with the diplomatic language that acknowledged sensitive topics without providing specific details. "Current operational environments require personnel who can think independently and adapt to situations that don't conform to standard procedures. Your previous conflicts might actually represent qualifications rather than disqualifications for emerging mission requirements." Major Williams joined the conversation, her combat experience lending authority to statements about operational realities that Colonel Martinez couldn't make from her administrative perspective. "Specialist Chun, the missions we're discussing require people who can make decisions under pressure, who can adapt to changing circumstances, who can execute complex operations without extensive supervision or support. Your service record suggests someone who possesses those capabilities." Maya considered the offer while maintaining her shooting position, using the familiar weight and balance of the rifle to anchor her thoughts during a decision process that would determine the direction of her life for years to come. She thought about the weapons she maintained for others to use, about the operational capabilities she possessed but wasn't permitted to employ, about the sense of purpose that had been missing from her civilian existence. She thought about her father's service in Afghanistan, about the meaning he'd found in missions that served purposes larger than personal comfort or professional advancement. She thought about the operators who would carry the weapons she'd maintained into situations where her technical expertise might be the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. What would be the terms of return to active duty? Rank, assignment, security clearance, duty location, deployment expectations? Colonel Martinez smiled, the expression of someone whose recruitment effort was approaching successful conclusion. "Your rank would be restored with consideration for the experience you've gained during civilian employment. Your security clearance would be upgraded to levels appropriate for the missions you'd be assigned. Duty location and deployment schedules would depend on operational requirements that change based on global developments." Maya understood that she was being offered a return to the profession that had defined her adult life, with assignments that would utilize her capabilities at levels that hadn't been possible during her previous service. The military institution that had discarded her was now acknowledging that her skills were needed for missions that couldn't be accomplished by personnel with standard qualifications. "How much time do I have to consider this offer?" The operational timeline that's driving current recruitment efforts doesn't permit extended consideration periods, Major Williams replied. "Personnel selections for upcoming assignments need to be finalized within days rather than weeks or months." Maya shifted her position behind the rifle, using the movement to buy time for final consideration of a decision that would transform her life in ways she couldn't fully predict. She thought about the precision instruments she'd spent 4 years maintaining, about the operators who'd trusted their lives to equipment she'd prepared, about the chain of responsibility that connected her solitary work to mission success, or failure in places that didn't appear on public maps. She thought about the decommissioned F-16 where she'd eaten lunch for 4 years, about the conversations she'd had with an aircraft that had served its country until technological advancement made it obsolete. She thought about her own obsolescence in civilian employment, about capabilities that were wasted on routine maintenance when they could serve purposes that mattered for national security. "Ma'am, I accept the offer to return to active duty with the understanding that my assignments will utilize my capabilities in service of legitimate national security objectives." Colonel Martinez nodded with satisfaction that suggested the outcome had never been in serious doubt. "Welcome back to active duty, Specialist Chun. Your first assignment briefing is scheduled for 1400 hours this afternoon. Transportation and temporary quarters will be provided while your permanent duty station is being finalized." Maya rose from the shooting position and began the methodical process of clearing and securing the rifle she'd been using for demonstration purposes. Her hands moved through the familiar procedures while her mind processed the implications of her decision to return to military service under conditions that remained largely undefined. As she completed the weapon clearing process, Maya noticed that the observation and measurement equipment was still recording her actions, documenting her technical procedures with the same thoroughness that had characterized her shooting assessment. Someone apparently wanted a complete record of her capabilities, both operational and technical, for purposes that would be revealed during her afternoon briefing. The personnel who'd observed her performance were beginning to pack their equipment with the efficient coordination that marked the conclusion of successful operations. Maya recognized the satisfaction in their movements, the professional contentment of people who'd accomplished objectives that served purposes larger than their individual responsibilities. Major Williams approached with documents that Maya recognized as preliminary paperwork for return to active duty, including forms that would restore her security clearance and authorize her access to classified information relevant to her upcoming assignments. The speed with which the administrative processes were being completed suggested that her recruitment had been planned in detail, that her acceptance of the offer had been anticipated with confidence that approached certainty. "Specialist Chen, your performance this morning exceeded expectations that were already quite high," Major Williams said as Maya signed the various forms that would restore her military status. "The capabilities you've demonstrated will be invaluable for missions that require precision and independence under conditions that challenge even experienced personnel." Maya completed her paperwork and prepared to leave the long-range training facility, understanding that her civilian life was ending and her military career was resuming under circumstances that would test her abilities in ways that training exercises couldn't simulate. She was returning to service with capabilities that had been enhanced by 4 years of technical experience and perspective that civilian employment had provided. As the convoy of vehicles departed the training facility, Maya watched the desert landscape pass outside her window and considered the path that had led her from promising young soldier to discharged specialist to civilian contractor to recalled military asset. Each transition had been driven by institutional needs that superseded her personal preferences, but somewhere in that progression, she'd developed capabilities that apparently made her valuable for missions that required exceptional performance under demanding conditions. 3 months later, Maya stood on the observation deck of the Special Operations Training Center, watching the new class of recruits attempt to qualify on the long-range precision course that had become the standard for advanced marksman selection. The afternoon sun created sharp shadows across the desert training facility, highlighting the careful positioning of targets at ranges from 800 to 2,000 yards that challenged even experienced shooters. Her return to active duty had been more complex than anticipated, involving assignments that utilized her technical expertise as much as her shooting capabilities. Staff Sergeant Chun now served as primary instructor for advanced marksmanship programs, while maintaining her role as senior weapons technician for classified operations that she couldn't discuss even with her security clearance. The combination had proven invaluable for missions that required both technical precision and operational flexibility. Captain Rodriguez, formerly Sergeant First Class Rodriguez from her civilian employment, approached with the daily training reports that documented student progress and equipment status. His promotion to the Special Operations Support Command had coincided with Maya's return to service, part of broader personnel changes that were integrating civilian contractors with active duty specialists in ways that maximized institutional knowledge. Chun, the morning class, struggled with wind compensation at 1,500 yards. Rodriguez reported, consulting his tablet for specific performance metrics. 3 students couldn't achieve qualifying scores, even with unlimited ammunition and coaching support. We may need to revise selection standards or extend training timelines. Maya reviewed the shooting data while considering the operational requirements that drove current selection criteria. The missions that required extreme long-range capabilities were increasing in frequency and complexity, demanding personnel who could achieve first-shot hits under conditions that didn't permit multiple attempts or extended preparation time. The standards are appropriate for operational requirements, Maya replied. Students who can't achieve them under training conditions won't perform adequately when lives depend on their precision. Better to identify limitations during selection than discover them during missions. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. She thought about her own training progression, about the years of practice and refinement that had developed her capabilities to levels that exceeded standard military requirements. The students below were attempting to compress similar development into timeframes that challenged both human learning capacity and institutional patience. The observation deck provided clear views of the entire training complex, including facilities that had been expanded to accommodate increased demand for specialized instruction. Maya's curriculum had been adopted throughout the special operations community, with requests for training support coming from units that had previously relied on less systematic approaches to marksmanship development. Mrs. Patterson from the base library had become an unexpected resource for historical research that informed training methods. Her academic background in military history provided context for understanding how precision shooting had evolved from individual craft to institutional capability, helping Maya develop instruction that honored traditional methods while incorporating modern technology and scientific understanding. Your grandmother would be proud, Mrs. Patterson had observed during one of their weekly discussions about training philosophy. You've taken your grandfather's lessons and transformed them into knowledge that will serve generations of warriors. Maya had never mentioned her grandmother's influence to Mrs. Patterson, but somehow the librarian had intuited the connection between family tradition and professional development that shaped Maya's approach to instruction. The patience her grandmother had taught through paper crane folding had translated into teaching methods that emphasized methodical development over rapid results. The precision shooting program had attracted attention from military leaders who recognized its potential for broader applications. Maya had been invited to present her training methods to senior officers from multiple commands, resulting in resource allocations that supported expansion of specialized instruction capabilities throughout the military system. Colonel Martinez, now serving as Deputy Commander for Special Operations Personnel Development, had become Maya's primary advocate for institutional changes that integrated advanced marksmanship training with other specialized skills. Their weekly planning meetings focused on curriculum development that prepared personnel for missions that challenged conventional approaches to military operations. Your program is producing marksmen with capabilities that exceed anything we've seen in traditional Military training. Colonel Martinez had noted during their most recent assessment review. More importantly, you're teaching decision-making and adaptability that serve operational requirements beyond shooting skills. Maya's instruction emphasized understanding over memorization, teaching students to analyze environmental conditions, calculate ballistic solutions, and adapt to changing circumstances rather than simply following preset procedures. The approach produced graduates who could perform effectively in situations that hadn't been anticipated during their training. The program's success had led to requests for Maya to train instructors from other military units, creating a multiplier effect that extended her influence throughout the special operations community. Students who completed her courses returned to their home units with capabilities that enhanced overall operational effectiveness in ways that were measured through improved mission success rates rather than training metrics. Maya's technical expertise had proven equally valuable for equipment development, projects that improved weapon systems and accessories used throughout the military. Her understanding of precision shooting requirements informed design decisions that enhanced reliability and accuracy for users who would never know her name but would benefit from her contributions to their equipment. The weapons maintenance facility where she'd spent 4 years as a civilian contractor had been transformed into an advanced technical training center that prepared military personnel for specialized equipment support roles. Maya's curriculum integrated theoretical knowledge with practical experience, producing technicians who understood the relationship between mechanical precision and operational effectiveness. Her former workbench had been preserved as a demonstration station where students learned the methodical attention to detail that transformed routine maintenance into operational art. The tools and techniques that Maya had developed during her civilian employment now served as standard procedures for military personnel responsible for maintaining precision equipment under field conditions. The decommissioned F-16 that had served as Maya's lunch companion during her civilian years had been relocated to the training center as a monument to the connection between individual expertise and institutional capability. A plaque mounted on its wing honored the contributions of civilian contractors whose knowledge had enhanced military effectiveness in ways that deserved recognition and preservation. Maya's afternoon classes focused on advanced students who had completed basic marksmanship qualifications and were preparing for assignments that required exceptional capabilities. These students represented the most promising candidates from throughout the military system, personnel who had demonstrated both technical competence and the mental discipline necessary for precision shooting under pressure. The curriculum included psychological preparation that addressed the stress and responsibility associated with precision shooting in operational environments. Maya taught students to manage the emotional challenges of taking human life at extended ranges, helping them understand the moral and ethical dimensions of their capabilities while maintaining operational effectiveness. Precision shooting is not about taking life, Maya would tell each new class during their initial briefing. It's about ending threats that endanger innocent people and completing missions that serve purposes larger than individual circumstances. Your technical skills serve moral purposes that justify the responsibility you're accepting. The training program had evolved to include family support services that helped students' relatives understand the nature of specialized military service and the demands that such assignments placed on personal relationships. Maya's own experience with family loss had informed her understanding of how military service affected families, leading to support programs that strengthened rather than strained family relationships. Her grandmother, now in her 80s, had become an unofficial counselor for military families struggling with deployment stress and operational demands. The patience and wisdom that had shaped Maya's childhood were now helping other families navigate the challenges of military service at levels that exceeded routine assignments. Your grandfather would understand, Grandmother Chun had told Maya during a recent visit. He served his country in ways that required sacrifice from our entire family. You're helping others carry similar burdens with dignity and purpose. The recognition that Maya's service carried meaning beyond individual achievement had transformed her understanding of military purpose and personal responsibility. She was no longer simply a skilled technician or exceptional marksman, but a teacher whose influence would extend through generations of students who would carry her lessons into missions that served national security interests around the world. The training center had become a model for other military specialties, seeking to integrate individual expertise with institutional capability. Maya's methods were being adapted for pilot training, explosive ordnance disposal instruction, and other specialties that required exceptional performance under demanding conditions. Her evening routine now included correspondence with former students who had completed their training and been assigned to operational units around the world. Their letters described missions and challenges that demonstrated the practical value of their instruction while providing feedback that informed curriculum improvements and development priorities. The letters also provided evidence of the human impact that precision training had on military operations, with students reporting successful missions that had been accomplished with minimal casualties and maximum effectiveness. Maya understood that her instruction was serving purposes that extended beyond military objectives to include protection of civilian populations and advancement of international stability. Her apartment had been replaced by quarters on the base that reflected her senior instructor status while maintaining the simple organization that characterized her personal preferences. The walls now displayed certificates and awards that recognized her contributions to military training and equipment development, but the most treasured items remained her father's medals and photographs that connected her service to family tradition. The jade plant that had survived 4 years of civilian employment now thrived in a sunny window that overlooked the training ranges, where her students practiced the skills that she had taught them. Its steady growth served as a metaphor for the development that characterized both her personal progress and the institutional changes that her service had influenced. Maya's work had attracted attention from academic institutions that recognized the scientific and educational value of her training methods. She had been invited to guest lecture at military academies and universities, sharing her expertise with students who would become the next generation of military leaders and civilian researchers. The lectures provided opportunities to discuss the intersection of individual expertise and institutional capability, helping students understand how specialized skills served broader purposes when properly integrated with organizational objectives. Maya's presentations emphasized the importance of continuous learning and adaptation in environments that demanded exceptional performance. Her influence had extended to international military exchanges that shared American training methods with allied forces facing similar operational challenges. Maya's curriculum had been translated into multiple languages and adapted for different cultural contexts while maintaining the core principles that made it effective for developing precision shooting capabilities. The international programs had provided Maya with perspectives on global security challenges that informed her understanding of how individual skills served purposes that transcended national boundaries. She had trained students from allied nations who would return to their home countries with capabilities that enhanced collective security and international cooperation. As the afternoon training session concluded, Maya watched her students secure their equipment and prepare their daily reports with the systematic attention to detail that characterized successful military operations. Each student represented months of intensive instruction that had developed capabilities serving purposes larger than individual advancement or institutional metrics. The students would graduate from her program and disperse to assignments around the world, carrying with them technical skills and decision-making, abilities that would influence the outcome of missions she would never know about in detail. Their success would be measured in lives saved, objectives accomplished, and threats eliminated rather than training scores or administrative evaluations. Maya's contribution to their development represented the completion of a cycle that had begun with her father's service in Afghanistan, continued through her own military training and civilian experience, and now extended through instruction that would influence military operations for decades to come. She had transformed personal expertise into institutional capability that served purposes worthy of the sacrifices that military service required. 5 years later, the congressional hearing room buzzed with the subdued energy that preceded high-profile testimony on national security matters. Master Sergeant Maya Chun adjusted her dress blue uniform and reviewed her prepared remarks one final time, understanding that her testimony would influence funding decisions that affected specialized training programs throughout the military system. The morning session would focus on the effectiveness of advanced marksmanship instruction and its contribution to COFA operational success rates in complex operational environments. Senator Patricia Williams, chairwoman of the Armed Services Subcommittee on Personnel, called the hearing to order and introduced Maya with credentials that reflected 5 years of exceptional service since her return to active duty. The introduction highlighted her role in developing training programs that had been adopted throughout the special operations community and her technical contributions to equipment improvements that enhanced precision shooting capabilities for personnel at all skill levels. Master Sergeant Chun, your training program has achieved qualification rates that exceed previous standards, while producing graduates whose operational performance has been exceptional, Senator Williams began. Can you explain how your methods differ from traditional marksmanship instruction and why those differences produce superior results? Maya stood and approached the witness table, carrying herself with the confidence that came from years of successful instruction and operational support. Her testimony would draw upon data from hundreds of students who had completed her training and been assigned to missions that tested their capabilities under conditions that exceeded training scenarios. Ma'am, traditional marksmanship instruction focuses on mechanical technique and repetitive practice that develops muscle memory through volume of fire. Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the hearing room sound system. Our program integrates technical understanding with decision-making training that prepares students for situations that require adaptation rather than repetition of learned behaviors. She explained how her curriculum addressed the psychological and intellectual challenges of precision shooting in operational environments, teaching students to manage stress, analyze complex situations, and make ethical decisions under pressure while maintaining technical performance standards that exceeded conventional requirements. The committee members asked detailed questions about training costs, graduation rates, and operational effectiveness, metrics that demonstrated the program's value relative to resource investments. Maya provided specific data that documented reduced training time, improved mission success rates, and decreased personnel casualties in units that included graduates from her specialized instruction. The program has graduated 847 students over the past 5 years, Maya reported, consulting her prepared statistics. Post-training assessments indicate that 94% achieve operational effectiveness standards that exceed previous benchmarks, and mission analysis shows that units with program graduates experience casualty rates that are 60% lower than comparable units using conventional training methods. The testimony continued for 2 hours, covering technical details, cost analyses, and expansion possibilities that would extend specialized instruction to additional military units and allied forces. Maya's responses demonstrated both technical expertise and institutional understanding that impressed committee members whose experience with military witnesses had prepared them for narrower perspectives. During the lunch recess, Maya walked through the Capitol building's corridors, surrounded by artwork and architecture that represented the democratic principles her service was designed to protect. She paused before a memorial wall dedicated to military personnel who had made ultimate sacrifices in service of national security, finding her father's name among the thousands of others who had given their lives in Afghanistan and other theaters of operation. The afternoon session focused on international applications of Maya's training methods and their contribution to Allied force development. She described programs that had been implemented with NATO partners, sharing expertise that enhanced collective security capabilities while strengthening relationships between American forces and international counterparts. Our training exchanges with Allied forces have produced capabilities that serve mutual security interests, Maya explained to committee members who were particularly interested in cost-sharing arrangements and diplomatic benefits. Students from partner nations return to their home countries with skills that enhance their effectiveness while creating professional relationships that facilitate future cooperation. The questions revealed congressional understanding that military training programs serve diplomatic as well as operational purposes, creating networks of professional relationships that influenced international cooperation on security matters that extended beyond specific military operations. Senator Williams concluded the hearing with comments that praised Maya's service and the institutional changes that her expertise had influenced throughout the military system. Master Sergeant Chun, your testimony demonstrates how individual excellence can be transformed into institutional capability that serves national security interests in ways that justify significant resource investments. 10 years later, Colonel Maya Shun stood at the podium of the National War College, addressing a gathering of senior military officers and civilian defense officials who had assembled for the annual Advanced Military Education Symposium. Her presentation would summarize a decade of research into precision training methods and their application to various military specialties that required exceptional performance under demanding conditions. The audience included general officers from multiple services, senior civilians from defense agencies, and international military representatives whose governments had adopted training methods developed under Maya's leadership. Her influence had expanded far beyond marksmanship instruction to encompass broader questions about how military institutions developed and utilized specialized expertise. Ladies and gentlemen, the past 15 years have demonstrated that individual capabilities can be systematically developed and institutionally preserved in ways that serve national security interests across multiple domains. Maya began her presentation supported by data that documented the evolution of specialized training throughout the military system. She described programs that had adapted her methods for pilot training, special operations instruction, and technical specialties that required precision performance under stress. The common elements included emphasis on understanding over memorization, integration of technical and decision-making skills, and systematic development of capabilities that served purposes larger than individual advancement. The presentation included case studies from recent operations where personnel trained using her methods had achieved mission success under conditions that challenged conventional approaches. The examples demonstrated both operational effectiveness and strategic impact, showing how individual expertise contributed to broader policy objectives. Training excellence requires institutional commitment that extends beyond individual programs to encompass cultural changes that value competence over compliance. Maya concluded her remarks addressing systemic issues that affected military effectiveness at all levels. The question period revealed sophisticated understanding among audience members of the challenges involved in developing and maintaining specialized capabilities within large bureaucratic organizations. Their questions addressed leadership requirements, resource allocation priorities, and cultural factors that either supported or hindered excellence development. Following her presentation, Maya was approached by Lieutenant General Patricia Martinez, who had commanded the Special Operations Personnel Development Command before her current assignment as Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel. Their conversation focused on succession planning for leadership positions and specialized training programs that required both technical expertise and institutional knowledge. "Maya, you've created something that transcends individual contribution," General Martinez observed as they walked through the college's corridors, lined with portraits of distinguished graduates. "The question now is how to ensure that the institutional knowledge you've developed continues to serve military effectiveness." After your retirement, Maya had begun considering retirement planning that would transition her responsibilities to the next generation of instructors, while preserving the methods and principles that had proven effective across multiple military applications. Her legacy would be measured not by her individual achievements, but by the institutional capabilities that would continue serving national security interests long after her departure from active duty. 15 years later, the retirement ceremony took place at the Special Operations Training Center that had been renamed the Chun Center for Advanced Military Instruction in recognition of Maya's contributions to specialized training development. The facility now encompassed multiple ranges, technical laboratories, and classroom buildings that supported instruction in various specialties, requiring exceptional performance standards. General Sarah Williams, now serving as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, delivered remarks that placed Maya's career in historical context, describing her influence on military training as comparable to earlier innovations that had transformed military effectiveness. During periods of significant strategic change, Colonel Chun's contributions extend far beyond the thousands of students she has personally instructed. General Williams told the assembled audience of military leaders, former students, and family members, "She has demonstrated how individual excellence can be systematically developed and institutionally preserved in ways that serve enduring national security interests." The ceremony included presentations from international military representatives whose forces had benefited from training programs developed under Maya's leadership. Their remarks emphasized both operational effectiveness and diplomatic value, showing how military education served broader purposes that strengthened international relationships and collective security capabilities. Maya's grandmother, now 93, but still sharp and determined, had traveled from California to attend the ceremony. During the reception that followed the formal proceedings, she presented Maya with a shadow box containing paper cranes folded from pages of her grandfather's military records, an artistic transformation of bureaucratic documents into symbols of patience, precision, and the ability to create beauty from materials that others might discard. "Your grandfather would understand what you have accomplished," Grandmother Chun said, her voice carrying the weight of decades spent watching family members serve purposes larger than individual comfort. "You have taken his lessons and shared them with warriors who will carry them to places we cannot imagine." Among the reception attendees were dozens of Maya's former students, now serving as senior officers and specialized instructors throughout the military system. Their presence demonstrated the multiplier effect that characterized effective military education, with each graduate extending Maya's influence through their own service and instruction of subsequent generations. Captain Rodriguez, now serving as commandant of the Advanced Marksmanship School, presented Maya with a custom rifle built by students using techniques she had taught them for precision equipment modification. The weapon represented both technical achievement and symbolic recognition of her role in developing capabilities that would continue serving military effectiveness for decades to come. 20 years later, Maya walked through the gardens surrounding her grandmother's home in Northern California, accompanied by her 6-year-old niece, who listened with rapt attention to stories about military service and the importance of precision in all endeavors. The child showed remarkable focus for her age, asking thoughtful questions about the relationship between practice and performance that reminded Maya of her own childhood conversations with her father. "Aunt Maya, why is it important to do things exactly right?" the girl asked, holding Maya's hand as they examined the careful arrangement of plants, that reflected her grandmother's lifelong attention to detail and patience with natural processes. Because when something is important enough, almost right isn't good enough, Maya replied, kneeling to point out the precise spacing between flowers that created patterns visible only when viewed from specific angles. Your great-grandmother taught me that beautiful things require time, and important things require care. The lessons that had shaped Maya's approach to military service were now being passed to a new generation, through family relationships that connected individual development to broader purposes. Her niece represented the continuation of values that had influenced her grandfather's service, her father's sacrifice, and Maya's own contributions to military effectiveness. The garden contained a memorial section dedicated to family members who had served in various military conflicts, with small markers that honored their contributions while serving as teaching tools for younger family members. Maya's marker would eventually join the others, part of a family tradition that viewed military service as one form of participation in purposes that transcended individual circumstances. Her retirement years had included consulting work with civilian organizations that sought to apply military training methods to business and educational challenges, requiring exceptional performance under pressure. The principles she had developed for military instruction proved effective for other applications that required systematic development of specialized capabilities. Maya had also written a book about precision training methods that had become required reading at military academies and staff colleges around the world. The text integrated technical instruction with philosophical discussions about the relationship between individual competence and institutional effectiveness, helping readers understand how personal development served broader purposes. The book's success had led to speaking engagements at conferences and universities, where Maya discussed the intersection of individual expertise and organizational capability. Her presentations emphasized themes that had shaped her career: the importance of systematic development, the value of understanding over memorization, and the responsibility that accompanied specialized capabilities. 25 years later, dedication ceremony for the Maya Chun Memorial Library at the Special Operations Training Center drew attendees from throughout the military system and international allied forces. The library would house archives documenting the development of precision training methods and their application to various military specialties, preserving institutional knowledge for future generations of military leaders and instructors. Patricia Martinez, now retired, but serving as chairman of the ceremony organizing committee, delivered remarks that placed Maya's contributions in historical perspective. Colonel Chun's legacy demonstrates how individual excellence can be transformed into institutional capability that serves enduring purposes, she told the gathered audience of military leaders, former students, and family members. The library's collection included Maya's personal papers, training materials, and correspondence with students who had served around the world. The archives would support research into military training effectiveness while preserving the methods and principles that had proven successful across multiple applications and cultural contexts. Among the ceremony attendees were senior officers whose careers had been influenced by Maya's instruction, representing the extended impact that characterized effective military education. Their presence demonstrated how individual contribution could influence institutional development across multiple generations of military leadership. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a bronze statue depicting Maya in instructional pose, working with a student to achieve precision in both technique and understanding. The artwork captured both technical competence and teaching ability, showing how individual expertise served broader purposes through systematic development of institutional capabilities. Maya's niece, now a senior at West Point and planning a military career focused on advanced training development, delivered closing remarks that connected family tradition to continuing service. My aunt taught our family that precision is a form of respect. Respect for the mission, respect for the people who depend on our work, and respect for the purposes that justify our service. 30 years later, the newspaper obituary was brief, but respectful, noting Maya's military service and contributions to training development, without revealing classified details about operations that had benefited from her expertise. The public record reflected a distinguished career in military education, international cooperation, and institutional development that had influenced military effectiveness in ways that would continue serving national security interests for generations. Her private funeral was attended by family members, former students, and military leaders whose careers had been shaped by her instruction and example. The service emphasized themes that had characterized her life: service to purposes larger than individual circumstances, systematic development of capabilities that served enduring needs, and the transformation of individual expertise into institutional knowledge. The eulogy was delivered by one of her first students, now a four-star general whose career had included command of special operations forces in multiple theaters of operation. His remarks emphasized both technical competence and personal character, describing how Maya's instruction had influenced not only military capabilities, but also ethical development and decision-making abilities. She taught us that precision was about more than hitting targets, the general observed. She taught us that our capabilities carried responsibilities to serve purposes worthy of the